Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Education's Best Medicine. And I want to thank everyone, and I want to thank all the viewers in the viewership on Facebook and educationsbestmedicine.com, new website, and just want to thank everyone for helping us make this successful. We want to increase the viewership and listenership. So this is a really important show today. It's kind of been the culmination, I guess, for both of us. Our careers. I have Miss Crenshaw, Cheryl Cranshaw, and we've been working collaboratively, I guess, for the last year or so. But we've probably been working together probably in the last 20 years, I think, because of the view. You know, you try to work within the system and you try to support system, but when the system or systems are not providing the kind of care that you need, you have to look elsewhere. That's not to disparage these other systems, but it's really true. And I think Cheryl's going to talk about some of the issues in terms of data, not just here, but the world. So again, I start this conversation. If you're interested, and I'm sure you are, and you're listening to us, thank you very much. This is a discussion around. First of all, I'd like to introduce my guest, Ms. Cheryl Crenshaw. She is the lead of Conscious Voices, and I am on the leadership team. And I just thought it was so important to have this conversation as we start the new year about healthcare systems and healthcare integration, and it's so important that we understand that we need integrated care. We need care that provides not only mental, but also medical, but mental health services to us. And I wanted to have Cheryl, first of all, talk a little bit about her background, and then I'm going to go from a historical standpoint, and then I'm going to give it back to her as we start talking about it. Cheryl, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me and come over. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and background, and what brings you to the table.
All right. Thank you, George, for having me.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate the space to talk about this. So I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and
You're also a lawyer, aren't you?
I am. We
Mhm.
found, but I was a lawyer first.
Okay.
And when I tell my story, I tell the lawyering part because usually I tell the lawyering part because it reflects on how I ended up at the place I am now in terms of my opinion about integrated care for African Americans. Because I started as an attorney, as a public defender, working, in the criminal justice system. I saw a lot of African Americans coming through the criminal justice system, um, overrepresentation of our people.
Like it is today.
Yeah, in the criminal justice system. And I was, when I became a lawyer, it was to try to make things better. And I didn't feel like the lawyering part was really an effective way to do that. So I actually left the law and went and got my degree in counseling and therapy, in psychological counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started working inside of the system.
Okay.
And I thought I was going to see something better inside of the mental health system.
Mm-hmm.
But what I saw was kind of like the same thing. We're overrepresented and we're not properly served, and we're in the system in a way that is, I don't think a lot of people understand.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the mental health system, you think you're going there to get help, but there's so many obstacles and challenges to African Americans actually being served inside of the current system. I'm just talking about Alameda County.
Okay.
I mean, that's the one I know.
Right.
I've read about the other ones, but the one I know is, this one. And so there's so many obstacles that, well, I mean, we're going to talk about it. How do we make things better for ourselves?
Okay. And so I think if people, I've talked about this because I want to understand this. This is about African Americans. I know there's a discussion about Black/African Americans, but we're specifically talking about those that represent, and I've said this before, the 1619 Project, and also it's a discussion of 1619, right? The first time Africans entered these shores and were enslaved, and it just hasn't stopped. Also, I want to also reflecting the California reparations paper, again in the pathologization of the African American family. So we are specifically talking about for this what we think is the answer to this. So this will be the who, what, when, where, why. Uh, we are specifically talking about a system and those that have been affected by the system that are the descendants of African American slaves and are the representative of child slavery and the 350, maybe even 400 years now of institutional structural racism. And again, when we talk about the institutional structural racism, we talk about those not only about those general governmental system, but particularly in our case, the healthcare system, particularly as it relates to medical and mental health. I've talked really specifically about medical, but I wanted Cheryl to come in and add to the mix about mental health issues and how we decided that as on the leadership team to look and how to address this. And I want to thank the Conscious Voices leadership team for their work and their continued work in crafting this. So now that we kind of set the stage about the historical concept, let's fast forward to 2011 and tell me about 2011 in the African American Utilization Report and what they found and what were your concerns around it and what our concerns should be around it.
So let's see. I think before we get there, I wanted to talk about what integrated care is. Okay. So integrated care is from our perspective, it's going to be the co-location of behavioral and medical services in one location. And so what you would think about is if people use the county system, think about Asian services, Asian Native American Health Center, La Clinica. Those are sort of full service facilities. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing, that's what we want for African Americans.
Because at this point, we don't have a medical center that is specifically pointing to our needs like other communities.
Right, and that leads us to the conversation about the 2011 report. Okay. Because what that report found in 2011 was that the services, all of them, the Eurocentric, all the ethnic services, the data is showing that those services are not effective for African Americans. Mm-hmm. And what this report did was it made goals and recommendations that could be implemented inside of the services to improve outcomes for African Americans.
How can people search that report?
Okay. So if you're looking, if you put in your Google search box the African American Utilization Report, the 2011 African American Utilization Report, you should be able to find the report.
Everyone take a look at it. Very important. It's going to be the structure for our discussion from this day forward about why we need an integrated healthcare center.
And if you're looking, and you could pull the report up now because we may get to some parts of it that you could follow along with. But so basically what this report says is that the services that the county is providing African Americans don't work. And if you notice, it is an Alameda County report. So it was a time, it was a moment in history, in our history, where you have the Alameda County behavioral health care saying services are inappropriate, they don't work, and here are the goals and recommendations, things that the county can do, that we can do to shore up the services, improve the outcomes for African Americans. And the outcomes are, the disparities are significant. If you look at Asian life expectancy, Asians live 14 years longer than African Americans. If you look at Latinx life expectancy, it's 9 years longer. And Native Americans live 5 years longer than African Americans. So, and the CDC would say even 1 year life, difference in life expectancy is significant. Mm-hmm. So we're way behind in terms of our life expectancy, which reflects on the services that we're getting. Because if you're getting the proper prevention and early intervention services, you're getting timely appointments, you're getting appropriate mental health care, your life expectancy is gonna be better. It's gonna be improved.
And I guess that my understanding this came, a couple of years back, maybe 15, 20, when they could point to your zip code and tell you how long you were going to live. Mm-hmm. And increasingly in African American communities, those zip codes show the highest rates of infant mortality, morbidity, death from heart disease, death from cancer, and again, those things haven't changed. Right. That's the concern.
Yeah, African Americans are number one. And I should do a little bit of a disclaimer, because some of the stuff that we talk about is disturbing. When I start talking about life expectancy, people think I'm talking about them, and I'm talking generally about about our population. Of course, me and you are going to be some of those people that live to be 105 years old. We're going to be the long-lived relative, Yeah.
Okay.
But in the aggregate, our life expectancy is not, is the lowest of any a major ethnic.
And that's kind of the who. That's who this affects. And we have to be real specific about African Americans, descendants of slaves, members of the 1619 Project, or in California's case, paper on reparations that talks to the pathologization of the African American family. Again, this has been a systemic structural discussion that has just had raging effects on us in terms of our health and our wealth. I want you to kind of talk about what does a integrated African American healthcare center that includes medical as well as psychiatric services look like to you?
So I think one of the main things that makes it beneficial is that you have communication between the medical and the mental health practitioners. What happens to African Americans is, because we go to La Clinica for our medical services, then we go somewhere else for our mental health services, then we go somewhere else for our dental. We might pick up medications in different places. The services are not coordinated. And one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, and that contributes to the poor outcomes. So if I'm Asian in Alameda County, I have 3 integrated care facilities that I can go to that will, co-locate the services, but they'll also, communicate with each other.
Right. One hand knows what the other hand is doing.
Right.
And I always say that you tell me how my patient gets to that facility, and I'll tell you if they're going to get care and if they're even going to come.
Right.
And so I still think there could be 2 or 3 bus rides between seeing primary care in the morning and then going for mental health services in another location, as well as dental services in another location. So our services, 1, haven't spoken to us, and 2, are so disjointed and misarranged that even if we thought we were getting care, we're not. And we're so used to bad care that we don't know what good care looks like.
Mm-hmm. And you know, and the thing about it is, after this report, we don't have to argue about is care good or bad, or you know, it's bad. That's what the report said. And then there was a promise from the director of behavioral health care at the time
mhm.
to do quality improvements on the services. That was in 2011.
We're in 2020. We're in 2023. What do you think? Where do you think we're at now?
Well, what do you think, George?
Oh wow, that's deep. I think we're 300 years removed. We still have the same level and lack of, not only lack of service, but a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's kind of disrespectful that African Americans of all stripes, uh, young to old, have had to deal with this. Uh, and I think it kind of lends itself in 2023 to a particular uh, suit that the county is going through right now in regards to uh, services in the jail population, which is usually 40 to 50% black, even more so.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that.
But I want to just point out
Sure.
that so at the time of this report, they actually do mention that Santa Rita jail, which is where that the Babu case came from, that 70% of African Americans at the time were the jail psychiatric services was severely mentally ill African Americans in jail psychiatric services was at like 70%.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little lower today. It's like 50%, but we're still well overrepresented.
Well, it plays itself off in a cycle of care that is a circle. Well, the circle is prison, homelessness, family member, hospitalization. If you're in LA, you are on the street and you get addicted and then you die.
Mm.
So, and what we see is kind of like musical chairs with our care. And so that person enters that prison system and tries to get mental health. In fact, the prison system is a larger purveyor of mental health services for African Americans. You know, simple as that. And I thought it was kind of important that, when I'll say it, that the leadership team at Conscious Voices believe we need to change. And that's not disparaging any of the other systems, but we need a system. We need a medical home that is integrated with mental and mental services that speaks specifically to our needs and our trauma.
Mm. So one of the things that I think might emphasize why it's important for it to be culturally responsive to African Americans is because when you're talking about mental health and you're talking about epigenetics and the trauma of the historical trauma.
What's epigenetics?
So, well, one of the things that we learned when we were formulating our interventions was we learned about epigenetic trauma, which it means that the trauma experienced by your ancestors is passed on. There's a I don't want to call it.
I use it for intergenerational trauma.
That's different.
Okay.
Because intergenerational trauma, I mean, how I think of intergenerational trauma is I'm watching your behavior. Epigenetic trauma is above that. It's more like you're
DNA?
Born. Yes, it's in the DNA.
Okay.
You're born with some vulnerabilities to trauma because of you know, you probably had ancestors who were kidnapped and made the middle passage.
Or traumatized, or sexualized, or imprisoned, or murdered, or any of those things that transcend this discussion about African Americans in the child slavery system. Dr. DeCurie talks about it in post-traumatic slave syndrome, because, and why we're having this conversation is people need to understand that this happened to us. We didn't happen to it. And so for us to have the responsibility to fix our trauma, when not only we didn't engage in it, we were the victims of it, is really kind of very disrespectful again. And I think that that's one of the problems that we have in this current healthcare system in regards to not only our medical health, but our mental health. You know, and I'll give an example that 30 years ago, when I started talking about race and health, I was considered to be racist because there was no racism and we were all the same. Well, a majority of the studies up until the last 15 years were based on white males, older white males, by the way, whether it be about heart disease or any of the chronic illnesses. So now when we look, now we're seeing that, for example, blood pressure medicines for African Americans, water, hydrochlorothiazide, a drug, a water pill works better on us. But if you talked about that 25 years ago, you'd be considered to be racist. So, and the same with mental health. You can't have a population of providers that have never had trauma and have kind of been privileged now have a discussion about taking care of you because they don't even know which way is up. And I think that was something that the report showed. Tell us a little bit about when this report was previewed and what was the pushback.
So the plan with this report, you'll have, the report has right on the cover, it says goals and recommendations. So the goals and recommendations were for providers and for the county to improve. There were quality improvements for African American
Quality assurance.
Quality assurance, quality improvements for African American services. And then it also, after the report, there was also a Mental Health Services Act innovation, which is, there was an African American innovation. That innovation created 14 African American strategies. And those strategies were provider strategies that were supposed to be integrated into provider services. So the services at Native American Health Center, at La Clinica, at the jail psych, they're in court now. Too bad they didn't take up some of these interventions back 10 years ago, because maybe now they wouldn't be struggling with compliance. The plan was that the county providers would take these recommendations and suggestions and integrate them into the services. And then that way, when African Americans go to Native American Health Center, somebody like you or somebody like me would be there to help them. Or in the alternative, say you can't be there because there's only one George, but you can train people. So would the providers be willing to take trainers and take training and collaborate with African American experts, subject matter experts, and develop, design effective services? So I
understand there was real pushback.
Well, we found out that. So what happened was, George, so much happened behind the scenes. On the surface, it seems like the director, who was the director at the time of the report, retired. You know how long it takes the county to do stuff, right? So the director retires. The director of Alameda County Behavioral Health Care Services, Dr. Mary Thomas, who is one of the champions of this report, she retires. Gigi Crowder, another one of the champions of this report, she leaves the county. So that leaves a void, like a leadership void. And that was the pushback. The providers were not willing to collaborate. They were not willing to work with us to improve the services. So they were not willing to do African American quality improvements.
So let's be clear about that. It's a numbers game. 83% of the providers are white, less than 5% are people of color. Less than 1 to 2% are African American. So when you get this pushback, because again, it's an unwillingness to be open about the fact that care isn't being provided to everybody the same. That created this discussion, and either you keep the provider and not go with the program, or go with the program and lose the provider.
Mm.
I think that's what happened.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Well, I was an innovator, right? So I was one of the people who created one of the curriculum. In fact, Conscious Voices curriculum was actually I guess the mother of Conscious Voices African American Wellbeing Center. When it became apparent that there was so much we could do for ourselves to help ourselves. We created these beautiful curriculums. There's 14 of them.
Give us an example of a part of that training for a provider not knowing how to address African Americans in that context. What would have been one of the strategies that you would have used, or would have been something that that provider would have had to learn?
So the one that comes up for me is the code. The code is based on Tupac Shakur's work. It's a transitional age youth intervention. It's based on the work of Tupac Shakur. Tupac Shakur, he negotiated the longest lasting peace settlement between the Crips and the Bloods ever. And he had a code, and the code was, the idea of the code was you keep, there's people are going to be in the life, people are going to be doing things, doing their business, but you want to keep the community safe. He called it keep it safe for squares. I was happy about that because I'm a square, right? Well, now I am. But anyway,
we all got life.
So he's gonna keep, So it was like, you don't shoot at parties, you don't shoot at parks, you don't stand on one side of the street and see your enemy on the other side and shoot across the street and hit the baby in the stroller. You don't sell drugs to pregnant women. There's a list of strategies to keep the community safe. And our plan was to revive that among young people, give them a chance to make their own rules about what are the things we can do to keep our community safe. Now think about how powerful that would be if we had providers at Native American Health Center or La Clinica or Asian, where they send our kids. How powerful that would be if you have providers that are willing to work with the kids to help them to create safety for themselves. That was one of the strategies that I think was powerful.
It's 2:30, and I have to do a quick announcement for the folks here. This is Believe Radio, 24-hour inspirational gospel channel, and we're at RTV in the greater Oakland area. We want to thank you for listening in, and want to thank Conscious Voices, and I want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank the Eyes of the Conscious Soul, no connection, for supporting the program. Ms. Barbara Hart. I think that why we need to have this, because we need to put some substance and structure to why we are doing so poorly, not only from a medical aspect, but from a mental health aspect. I always say follow the money. And you can believe that there was a lot of dollars not spent on us and spent on someone else so that we would have the services that they want to give us, as opposed to the services that we need, and the services that would be more, and it's not a fault, it's not a blame, it's just what happened. And I submit now we need to change that. we need an integrated healthcare center that speaks particularly African Americans in one location. It would include medical as well as mental. I want to thank Dr. Green and her leadership also, and the Conscious Voices leadership team for moving this plan forward. We've been meeting over the last almost 2 years now, and Mosey, thank you for being a part of this process. So we are looking at moving this plan forward, and we're going to be looking at funding sources. We're going to be looking at all the things we can do to have this come to fruition. And my belief is that we are able to bring a group of folks to the table that would not come to the table before, and to hear their voice. And you're a part of that voice, and I want you to be heard today, because we always talk about things, but in reality, there are people working in the background trying to make this a reality. And I want to again thank you again for your leadership with this. And I think that we need to now be okay with taking care of us. We need to be okay with saying this is what we need, because what we've been doing has not been effective. If anything, it's been killing us.
Right.
The data shows that, whether it be infant mortality or heart disease or consistently issues in terms of the homelessness, because homelessness and mental health are interconnected. When we have folks that have more mental health challenges, they're more likely to be homeless. They're more likely to be another dredge on the larger community. So this is a cost savings. I said follow the money, right? And we can ensure that folks that have mental health challenges that are African American are getting the proper services that just not just medicate them, but it involves their culture and who they are, and it's a welcoming space for them to have care done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the dream. That I think that's you and our goal, and I'm really excited about that. Why do you think it's important?
Wow. Well, I mean, as an elder, I gotta claim it now. Can't deny it.
I'm 67, so okay, we all good.
Yeah. Wow, you way older than me,
Yeah.
George.
I want to tell my grandbaby too, by the way. Kaylee, hello. Love you lots.
Hi, Kaylee.
It's my baby. And her grandparents want to wish them well. And as, again, what's my motivator? My great-grandchild. I want her to be able to come to a medical service that looks and speaks to her needs. The people should look like her. And if they don't look like her, they understand why she's here.
Right.
You know, now we've always said that you don't have to look like me to take care of me, but if you are going to not look like me and try to take care of me, you better understand who I am, what happened to me, and what's going down. Mm-hmm. And that's where the denial comes in. That's where the institutional and structural racism comes in, because as we talk to Governor DeSantis about advanced race theory, and the need not to, you can have every other kind of historical discussion, but when you get to African Americans in Florida, let's not talk about them.
Well, doesn't that kind of lead us to that same discussion? You can have integrated care for everybody, every single major ethnic group in the county, but you assign us to those ethnic care facilities. And
at some point,
and they don't do us right.
Secondary care,
according to the county's research.
So I asked everyone to jump on their Google and look up the African American Utilization Report. It was done in 2011. It is now 2023, and things have not changed. If anything, it's gotten worse.
Yeah, go. If people can go back through their mental Rolodex, they don't even have Rolodexes anymore.
Oh, God.
Go back through your, think about the last time you went into, the doctor, to see the doctor. Did you feel welcome? Did you feel like they were paying attention to you? Did you feel cared for? These are the kinds of things that, we we need, and they're provided for other ethnic groups, but not specifically for us.
There was a recent report from like the CCHF where I talked about it recently about the fact that when they interviewed African American folks about their care, overwhelmingly they felt like their care did not provide the care that they felt that they needed, that the provider did not listen to them. They felt that the provider was always rushed. They felt that the provider, it was a host of things. But these same people were really engaged. And so the discussion around African Americans in healthcare is that we're not interested in our care. We don't care about what's going on. When this group of people, I think it was around 100 they surveyed, engaged in their care, want to know about testing and how what they are doing would affect their care, which is a total opposite discussion in regards to us as a community and the fact that we don't care about our health and we're not interested in understanding what's going on with us. So on one hand, you have a system saying that we don't care. On the other hand, the people that enter the system say that's not true.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, George, because what this report says is that actually African Americans overuse the system. The point of the report was, we overuse the system, and yet we have poor outcomes. Number 1 in 8 of 10 categories of death by preventable illness, lowest life expectancy of any major ethnic group in the county, and yet we overuse the system.
And the system gets paid for it too.
There's a specific reference in there's a letter from, I did mention Dr. Thomas. Well, Dr. Thomas's letter, people are following along at home. There's a letter on page 8 and 9 from Dr. Thomas. And in this letter, Dr. Thomas, and I'm just going to quote it, here in Alameda County, low-income African Americans with serious mental illness and co-occurring disorders represent 25% of our population, and she means behavioral health population, yet they receive 40% of all mental health services. So, stated another way, African Americans with severe mental illness are 40% of provider reimbursement at the time of the report, 40% with severe mental illness. They're not talking about the mild to moderate. So the kid, the family, the individual.
We're talking about acute psychosis,
right.
Hallucinations, delusions.
So if you think of so you got the 40%, now you got to add the mild to moderate people, that are just, they're going because they have some sort of adjustment disorder. Okay. And then you got to add the substance abuse people. So how much, what percentage of provider reimbursement actually comes from African Americans being inappropriately served? We know it's inappropriate because the court has said it's, that services to severely mentally ill people in jail are inappropriate. So, and the county has said that their services are inappropriate, but we're like 40-50% maybe of provider reimbursement.
And we're only maybe 10-12% of the population.
Right. But do you see why it's so polarizing for us to start talking about our own health center? Because you're talking about taking away 40% of providers' reimbursement.
I've always said follow the money.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the money.
But this is the thing, George. Yeah. When we were asking them to collaborate with us, because we have lowest life expectancy, number 1 in 8
categories.
Number one in 8 categories. Number 1 in 8 of 10 categories. Got it right. 10 categories of death by preventable illness. Help us fix this, and the providers said no. That was heartbreaking because you have the county now saying your services are harmful to us. We use them, we overuse them, but we don't get better.
So why do you think?
And that's where Conscious Voices African American Wellbeing Center came from.
Why do you think this is not common knowledge? Why do you think that? And it's a rhetorical question because I don't know the answer, right? A lawyer, you don't ask the question, you don't answer it, right?
Right.
Why do you think that this is not common knowledge on all levels of our community, on all levels of the healthcare system, on all levels of the governmental and institutional systems that provide these services? Why isn't this a discussion around the board of supervisors, or now the new mayor, or now the city council?
Because the system for them is not broken. Exactly. It's working just fine. People are getting paid. The money's rolling in. But for us, that are losing loved ones, that are struggling with mental health issues, with no care, no appropriate care, and that's built into the system. Because with no care, we have to keep reusing the system.
So
we have to keep that reimbursement coming in.
I'm gonna throw you another piece. How did COVID change this?
Well, I mean,
I think it made it worse.
It did make it worse. In fact, but so this is the thing. Our life expectancy in Alameda County between 2011 and 2015, so between the time of the report and 5 years later when they reported, our life expectancy had gone down. Then COVID happened and our life expectancy went down again. It took another dip. So it's not just COVID. And I think when people start reflecting on the data, they might think that it's just COVID. Oh, something happened and now life expectancy for African Americans went down. No, before COVID, it started going down and there were no steps taken. Nobody was given information that they needed to help themselves because there's information out there. And it's mostly in the hands of the providers. The information we need to help ourselves inside of their institutions are in the hands of the providers because they have more, they know what they're doing. They know where the gaps are. They know where the problems are. They have to fix it. But there's no will to fix it.
There's no incentive.
There's no incentive. Mm-hmm. There's no financial incentive to fix it. In fact, there's a financial disincentive to fix it.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
This is true. So that's why I had you on today, because I've talked ad nauseum about the healthcare disparities, the medical healthcare disparities. But when we started talking and I started working with you and doing some more work in behavioral health / mental health, I realized that we need to have these things together and we need to have a conscious effort and a conscious dialogue about conscious voices, a conscious dialogue about the care of our people, the care of Africans Americans. And because if we didn't, we were just spinning our wheels, because that's what's been going on. And you can't tell me where healthcare outcomes have improved. You can't show me where people are better or when they go to their provider in any system, Kaiser, you pick it, that they feel as though they're getting the kind of care that not only helps them but heals them. Mm-hmm. So in other words, there's always we call it health care, but I think there's a separation of the health and the care, or the care and the health. That's what we're talking about today. This is why it's important that we do and we continue to emphasize an integrated healthcare system that includes medical as well as mental health services, and is specifically for African Americans. This speaks to us.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that too, because this report, I think, was one of the first times where they started talking about the connection between mental and physical health. There really is no separation. True. Sick mind, sick body, sick body, sick mind. Mm-hmm.
But that's a proud caricature of Western medicine. Western medicine has always separated it. And even at my time in Stanford, they were talking about there was a need for integration. But and the problem with it, I guess I'll pick on the big boy in the house, Kaiser, is that they were for years getting paid for mental health services, and until older white men started dying, they didn't feel there was a problem with the mental health services. Simple as that. So it's when other people besides us have a problem, homelessness, mental health, then it's the issue.
Right.
But before it was our problem. We weren't working hard enough. We weren't pulling up ourselves by our bootstraps. And
Right.
so it's almost it's again disingenuous, and it's almost traumatizing to go to a system that says you're not doing what you need to do to take care of yourself, when in fact their structural and institutional systems promote us not taking care of ourselves,
Right.
promote our discare or our disincentive to care to where you don't even go.
George, but that's one issue. But the other issue is that even when we do go, I mean, that's the research that's kind of a cold piece of work. Even when you do go, even when you're fully insured, even when you participate as your provider suggests, our outcomes are poor. So there's something happening inside of that system, even when it's supposedly working to capacity for us. So to me, that's just a stronger indication that we need to have something that's culturally responsive and focused on our care.
So I'm going to share this with you. I was just this piece. Mental health disparities. COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted already existing inequities and disparities in the health and behavioral health issues and access to the receiving effective health care for some populations in the U.S. For example, African Americans and Hispanic and Latino communities have experienced higher rates of COVID and death. That's what you were saying. So they're gonna blame it on COVID, but really it was there to begin with. It was even before.
It was there when the report happened. So now 2023, you're gonna say it's COVID? No.
So
do it.
Why are we concerned about this? The death rate for suicide for Black or African American men was 4 times greater for African American than for African American women in 2018. The overall suicide rate for Black or African American was 60% lower than the non-Hispanic white. The overall suicide rate for African American was 60% lower than that of the non-Hispanic white population in 2018. Black females grade 9 through 12 were 60% more likely to attempt suicide in 2019 compared to the non-Hispanic white females. So if they tell me the system is working, I would submit to you, look at your own data. Your data is clear that it's not working for us, and it hasn't worked for us. And if we continue around this road, it continues to kill us, and we can no longer let this happen to us as a community.
Right. Right. So that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to raise awareness around the benefits of integrated care. And incidentally, integrated care, I gave those statistics, Asians outlive us 14 years, Latinx people 9, and natives 5. That's the benefit of integrated care.
It would cost the system.
It extends life
costs the system less.
It helps people be healthy.
It should cost the system less. But again, if the money maker is you being sick, a sick care system. Remember,
right.
Joyce Elders, we have a sick care system. They ran her out of town. Joyce Elder said this a long time ago. Sasha said it a long time ago. Right? This is not new. It's old as Methuselah, my mom would say.
And the idea of, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the idea of integrated care. So Alameda County has provided ethnic specific integrated care for 50 years, since the 70s. So you've had, so there's this notion, they sort of understand that they need to do something, that's culturally specific for, people, everybody except African Americans, who can just use any services.
Right.
That
exactly.
are not connected, that are, not welcoming, that are, And then you just keep reusing them and reusing them. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. It's,
Well,
we're the cash cow of the system.
and also I want you to share with your concept of the paper organization. It's an organization on paper, but does not provide services to us. And if anything, it's just a cash. We're just, again, a cash cow for them. Your thoughts about that?
Well, one of the things, I mean, since we're just talking about integrated care, one of the things, that is a problem is that there's not there's no trained people aren't trained inside of the organizations, so they can't really help us. um,
Nor do they, some in most cases don't want to, unfortunately.
well, that's
We are secondary.
right. But I want to say, though I think it's to be fair, there's people inside of the organization. I think, like there's providers that may be willing, but when you have leadership of the organizations, and really ultimately it all falls on leadership of the county, because when we were moving towards quality improvements for African Americans, it was the county that came in and said we're not doing it. And I'm sure there were a lot of providers that didn't feel like they wanted to change anything, because change is hard.
Yeah.
But we were hoping, well, if we say to you, George, what you're doing is killing us, wouldn't you? I mean, see, we were thinking that there would be some humanity or some ethical sense about this, and that they would change. So it was really, like I said, heartbreaking when this report came down and there was no movement to change. And here we are, 12 years later.
And I think I want to emphasize to those that are listening, and the community, that I'm not angry, I'm not upset, I'm not mad. I just feel as though this has to change. So I could take all that emotion and have that, but I choose not to have that. I choose to change. Is the system willing to change, given the factual data? So we're not saying things from an emotional, or that's why I point to the 1619 project and the reparations paper on African Americans in California, recently done. That these are documents that we can go to, and it speaks on exactly what you're saying, and says that this is an institutional and structural and leadership issue. That's why I want to commend Governor Newsom for his support in the California legislature for supporting the reparations white paper and even having these discussions. I'm not concerned about reparations. I want to get the truth out. I want people to understand that this has been happening to us and now it needs to change. This is just not our fault. This is a fault of being enslaved for 300 years. If there's a fault. This is a fault of 40 acres in a mule.
Well, it's a lack of integrated care too. I mean, if you think about, if you really look at what these integrated care facilities do, well, they launch a lot of social programs, educational programs, nutritional programs, housing programs, employment.
Maternal infant health programs.
All launched from an integrated care facility that prioritizes that particular ethnic group.
Yeah.
So what does that mean, that they prioritize that particular ethnic group?
It's a discussion that we're going to continue to have. We got about 5 minutes here. I want to thank Cheryl Cranshaw before we even close this out. You are a diamond, and I want people to know you and appreciate you, because way before it was popular, you were talking about this and taking a lot of hits, not only from a personal and social, but a spiritual standpoint. And I want to let you know that I got your back.
Thank you.
And that anyone in the sound of my voice that knows me know I'm doggone serious about this one. We can no longer put our care in the hands of people that don't care about us. If you look back at the Black Panthers and their 10-point program, their healthcare clinics, their infant and child, their breakfast programs, they were about feeding the needs of our program. I would say to you, a lot of the things that the Panthers did, or extensions now, the food lunch program, the discussions of, community and school-based healthcare centers, and the discussion of integrated care that we need to embrace now. Give us a center and let us see how we can take care of ourselves. We've tried to allow everyone else to take care of us, and they haven't done a good job. In fact, they have been killing us. We can no longer accept that, and I will no longer accept it. We've got about 3 minutes. I want you to have the final word.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming. For inviting me.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're gonna come back. We just getting started. They're gonna know you. They got to know you.
And I want to thank I want to thank the Conscious Voices leadership team that's working to get the help, to get us an integrated care center. It seems like it's going to be a long road, but
not a hub, but an integrated healthcare center.
Right, not a hub, because what the hub will do is the hub will refer us back to the same services that are killing us right now today. There's no plan for the hub to shore up the referral destinations that are the problem. So, the hub is ill-conceived. So I guess if I was gonna make one last appeal, I would say that we want is to create a critical mass of people, of community, allies, friends, providers that are interested in creating appropriate, culturally responsive, integrated healthcare facilities.
Conscious Voices website.
Consciousvoice.org.
Check them out. I just launched my new website, educationisthebestmedicine.com. We're going to be running some surveys to both these websites, and I want people to participate and to have this discussion and to move this integrated healthcare system, a patient-centered integrated healthcare system that includes medical as well as mental health services in one location that is reflective of the need for Africans in America that are the direct result of the 1619 Project as well as the paper on reparations, because we need to get this done. Final word again?
I don't know. I will shout out to our team and to the African Americans who survived chattel slavery. We're still here. We're still making things happen.
I want to thank everyone for this show. It'll be on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube. I want you to play it and share it. I think it's important for us to have a ground foundation work. You're going to be hearing a lot of stuff in the future about, and so avoid the noise. It's going to be a lot of noise now. We done. This is the first strike, and I wanted people to have factual data as opposed to emotional data. I wanted people to understand that the research has always been there, just hidden. And now we need to bring it to light. We're talking about 2011, if you want to do a starting point, and go from there. We've been the most overstudied community and population in America, and our outcomes are just as poor. They have studied us to death. It needs to stop. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, instead of doing another study, how about, creating some services? We don't need another study. We have strategies, we have interventions, to begin the quality improvements. Um, so, yeah.
Well, again, Cheryl Crenshaw, Conscious Voices, leadership team, I want to thank you for coming on. I always believe that folks like yourself bring light to a very dark world. And if visions are seeing things unseen, truly you are a visionary. We thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. We'll be back next week. And thanks for listening. Please send comments. Really, really important. I usually don't ask for that kind of stuff, but this is really important. I think it's so important that we take control of us and put us at the center of us. Cheryl, thank you again.
Thanks, George.